Welcome to the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast, where it is never too early for fantasy football. My name is Jeff.
And I'm Alex.
Hey, Alex, how's it going today?
It's going well today. Another day on the podcast.
Another day to discuss what we love. We are just over 10 weeks away from opening kickoff, which we all love and can't wait. So it's coming really quickly. So we're going to get into some more fantasy topics over the next few weeks. As always, thank you for downloading, listening, liking, and commenting on our podcast videos. Please subscribe to us on the socials. We are on Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter with the handle at N2EFantasy. What do we have on today's show, Alex?
All right. Today we have some investigations to talk about with a couple different players. We also have updates on both DeAndre Hopkins and Dalvin Cook. We have Derek Carr doing an interview and talking about his time with the Raiders and some juicy nuggets sprinkled in there. We have some Buffalo Bills coaching news. We have an update on the Commanders' sell. We have the new Hard Knocks team that we can talk about, which Jeff quite loves. And we have a potential holdout to discuss as well. Very prominent running back may hold out. So, Jeff, why don't we start with some of these investigations that have popped out here on these prominent wide receivers? The first one being the Tyreek Hill investigation.
Yeah, so it appears like right after our podcast last week that investigation was closed. And then the very next day it was reopened with charges now pending. So I don't think he's been charged with anything yet. The story kind of looked a little suspicious that the guy was slapped in the back of the neck by an unknown person that he assumes was Tyreek Hill. So unless there was some great surveillance footage, it looks like this turns out to be a money grab. And even if there is surveillance footage, I don't believe a slap in someone's neck area, unless it causes bodily harm long term, warrants a suspension. And I believe that he should avoid suspension. Do you kind of concur with that?
I'm still contemplating how a slap in the neck is very hurtful. It's like it's not a choke, it's not a karate chop. I don't understand how a neck slap can even be warranted for this kind of thing, but I don't know. We have to see video of it. I agree with you. It's probably a money grab at this point. Again, how can you explain how a neck slap hurts you? I don't get it, but it's not something that we want to hear from someone who has a past of violent interactions with people. So we don't want to hear about someone getting in trouble who could be a first round pick in redrafts or a second round pick in redrafts, is one of the top wide receivers in the league. You don't want to hear about anything that could potentially lead to him sitting on the sidelines or being suspended. But right now, it doesn't seem like much of a story. I mean, we might see video evidence, or we might see a police report that details more severity. But I agree with your assessment that this is likely a nothing story.
Yeah, absolutely. And the only thing that could be bruised on the guy is his ego. So there is that. But moving on to another bruised ego, the cameraman operator and his assault case against Davante Adams has been dismissed. This, I also believe that it was under the same lines as the Tyreek Hill situation. Cameraman decided that he wanted to press charges against Adams for a potential concussion, and I just believe that Adams, well, not a great guy in this situation, might have done what anyone would have done and was trying to get to the locker room after a emotional loss and just shove whatever was in his way to get to the locker room.
Yeah, I don't think anyone likes someone shoving a camera in their face, especially when they're not in the mood. I think that they probably just settled it and it's going to disappear. And I don't think that there's going to be a suspension. If there is, I bet it's a small one, like maybe a max 1 game or something like that. But I don't see this being a big deal. And it's a totally understandable if an immature kind of reaction to that situation.
Yeah, and especially because it was dismissed, I expect 0 games because the NFL does look for that conviction or some admitting of wrongdoing on the part of the player. And it seems like the judge didn't even want to hear this case. So that's what a dismissal sounds like to me. Hopefully this is the last we hear of it. It'll probably go through civil court. I think there's already a case going on for that, but that makes sense because in order to get the money, you got to file the criminal case first, just to make it not look like a money grab. So speaking of a money grab, we have another wide receiver. Much happier news right now, but it seems like DeAndre Hopkins is mulling over offers from New England and Tennessee. But do we know any other team that might be in the mix here, Alex?
Yeah, it's been whispered and rumored that Cleveland and Carolina are both waiting in the wings to try to make an offer for DeAndre Hopkins. And I also think the reason why he's mulling over offers from New England and Tennessee is he doesn't want to play there. They might be the only people who have offered him any deal to this point, but he doesn't want to play there. So he's dragging it out, waiting to see if someone else comes. And I think he'd probably prefer Cleveland at this point just because he knows Deshaun Watson and Deshaun Watson wants to play with him again. But Carolina, I think, would be a good spot. I think he would probably be the number one there with the wide receivers that they have. And that would be a really good piece to pair with Bryce Young and potentially win that NFC South Conference or division. I think that would be interesting. That'd be similar to like the Texans, but we're just trying to see if there's more interest. And that's what he's doing.
Yeah, and I think that the wide receiver market is so weak right now that he's going to have a market, and he just might need to be patient and wait towards till we get a little closer to training camp. I do think most football executives and players, but more importantly the executives here, they're on vacation right now. They're resting up for the season. There's not that many moves right now for a reason, because I don't think there's that many team personnel that are in the office trying to make deals and everything right now. I think right now is just like that common vacation time before training camp opens up. It'll be interesting to see where Hopkins ends up, but I do think he's going to have his fair share of suitors once the time comes.
Yeah, hopefully there's more. But he is rumored to be potentially playing with another free agent at some point. Dalvin Cook wants to play with Hopkins somewhere, and that would be interesting. And Dalvin Cook has received a lot of interest from a particular division, Jeff.
It looks like the entire AFC East has been reportedly linked to Delvin Cook with different levels of interest. The Buffalo Bills, I think that their level of interest has been drummed up by the fact that Delvin's brother James plays there. And I'm not so sure that they're looking to play together, or if it's been more of like a media story that they're drumming up that they want this brotherly love episode in Buffalo. And New England was rumored this week that they were kicking the tires on Cook, and it doesn't look like there's much to do about that, because it does look like they are high on Pierre Strong backing up Ramondre Stevenson, and I believe that those two could be a very nice combination. And New England knows how to draft and use running backs, and they've done that well for the last, like, it feels like 15 years. So I totally believe that they'll probably be out of the market for a running back. They typically let all of their running backs walk as well, so it doesn't seem like a position that Bill likes to pay. Now, Miami is his hometown, and I think that's why everyone's drawing that connection there, is they think that everyone wants to go back home. And that, again, may be more of a story, but there were rumors reported today that Miami has made offers to Delvin Cook. And I think more surprisingly is that Delvin has multiple offers in hand that he's mulling over. So it does seem like there is some movement in that direction. And then to wrap up the AFC East, the Jets are a dark horse probably for both Hopkins and Cook. If we look at it from the perspective that Rodgers is coming into New York this year, and basically what that looks like is early on, to get Rodgers comfortable, because we do know the New York media is huge and he might be uncomfortable going from small town Green Bay to large city New York. Why not take a little bit of the pressure off of him and run the ball 30 times a game with Cook and Hall, and just try to figure it out that way? The Jets make a little bit of sense from that standpoint. What are your thoughts on these four teams, and then any other potential teams that you see?
Yeah, I don't see the Patriots or Bills as realistic options for Dalvin Cook. I do see the Jets as a potential option. I think that they want to scale back from Brees Hall just a little bit, just to keep him healthy. I could see them running the ball more, kind of like Green Bay did with AJ Dillon and the other running back that they have there with Green Bay as well. And I think that Hopkins would be the best receiver to potentially complement with Garrett Wilson. So he would be another big body target for Rodgers to throw to. I think that he would be a detriment to Wilson's fantasy value. So either of those guys going there would hurt Brees Hall or Garrett Wilson. I think Corey Davis would have to go because they wouldn't have space for him, and they need that money for these two guys as well. As far as the Dolphins, I think that they are interested in Dalvin Cook, and he's interested in going there. It would just make their running back group impossible, and it was already impossible last year before they added A-Chain, and if they add Dalvin Cook on top of that, I'm not touching any fantasy running back there until I know how it shakes out. These guys could go to I mean, I could see Hopkins going to a team like the Lions. I said that before. I think Hopkins makes the most sense with Buffalo, and I think that that's been your stance as well. Dalvin Cook needs to go to a team that needs a running back. It would make sense to go somewhere like Arizona, who they have just James Conner. I don't really like the backups there. I know they have some young guys that people like, but it's just James Conner to me there. And I think Dalvin Cook would be good there. I think Dalvin Cook would be good with the Cowboys. I think Dalvin Cook could probably go to one of these teams with a potential holdout or something. So I'm waiting for them to go somewhere relevant, and I'm waiting for teams to bite. And there just hasn't been enough interest out there yet, but camp hasn't started yet, so maybe they'll pick up.
Yeah. I think we got to get a little bit closer to camp. We got to get those front offices coming back into the mix, into the fold from vacations, and I think that will move the needle on this. But I think to your point that with DeAndre Hopkins with Buffalo makes way too much sense. There's a lot of speculation out there of why Stefon Diggs is actually upset. I do think it's not the targets that he's getting. I do think it's the fact that he's double covered and the opportunities that he's getting. And I think it's very frustrating because you can't help a team when you're double covered and getting frustrated every game. So you do need someone on the opposite side to take some of that coverage away. And a serious threat, it would be the only thing that would take that away. So I think it makes too much sense. Delvin Cook, there's a lot of places that Delvin could go that would make me ecstatic. Dallas, as mentioned, I think that the Browns make a lot of sense behind Chubb because they don't really have much behind Chubb. And then, as you had mentioned, like, what if there's some holdouts at running back and they need a running back all of a sudden? So, I mean, he's someone that could slide in and be a replacement player because that's basically what he is at that point because the starter's on strike and all of a sudden the replacements come walking in. I believe they call them scabs, but that's what it'll seem like in that situation. But I do think he's looking for a good situation for himself. I do think he's looking for a situation where he can win. And I do think he's looking for a situation where he can contribute to those wins. I think Hopkins is looking for the same at the end of the day, especially a player this late into their career. I feel like that's what they're really looking for. Money, opportunity to help win.
So really, the best place for them to potentially go to is probably Buffalo. And Buffalo, they just re-signed both their head coach and their general manager. Jeff, how do you feel about that?
So I don't like this at all. I don't even know how to sugarcoat this. I think that the Bills have underperformed more and more each year the last 3 seasons. They took Kansas City down to that 14 seconds or whatever it was in the fourth quarter, and they lost that game in overtime. They almost got beat by third string quarterback and Mike McDaniel with the Dolphins this year, and they didn't even show up for the Cincinnati Bengal game the week after, which is, it's just telling me that something's going on here, and now Diggs is unhappy. This almost feels like a message to Diggs that McDermott and Bean have the power in this relationship, and they'll be here a lot longer than you'll be here. So that almost seems like a message to Diggs and why this actually went through when it did.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a message to Diggs saying that McDermott is in charge. and that's not going to change anytime soon. So get in line. Essentially, that's how I took it. And I know that you have a whole stance on defensive head coaches and how they're not very successful. And there are a number of people who are starting to point this out now too. And I don't necessarily fully buy into it. I know that there can certainly be a trend that offensive coaches are better, and that makes sense in a general standpoint. But I do think that there are some good defensive minded head coaches. It just seems to me that going back and forth with coaching egos and player egos is not a recipe for roster cohesion or for winning football. And they've neglected this offense quite a lot. You look at Kansas City, and they've been focusing on the offense, but in a way that they go for role players rather than necessarily a bunch of stars. But they're constantly adding to the offense, constantly trying to innovate, create new wrinkles to mess with other defenses and win football games and get Patrick Mahomes a bunch of stats. Doesn't seem like Buffalo is concerned with that. Seems like they're spending all their money on the defensive side, and maybe that will work with them, but they are surely missing a counterpiece to Diggs, and they need to find a way to make Diggs happy, because without Diggs right now, they don't have much to offer Josh Allen, and that's not good for winning.
Yeah, absolutely. And we will see what comes of this situation. And to your point, don't love defensive head coaches. I do think they get a tad bit too conservative. And I don't believe conservative wins in this league. And if you look at the teams that had the roughest stretches last year, it was teams with defensive head coaches. I think Salah had a few game stretch without a touchdown. So like nothing in junk time, nothing anywhere. It seems that like defensive coaches aren't as good with the offensive side of the ball as they would like to think that they are.
We have a current Saints former Raiders quarterback, Derek Carr, has been dishing on his time with the Raiders and has been saying some very unpleasant things. Jeff, what do you think about this, and what are some of the things that he said?
So Derek is very upset with how his tenure ended, and he has every right to be upset with the benching. I guess there was one quote that's out there from him that his wife cried over this, and I guess watching your person that is your partner go through a situation like this can be very emotional. And once Derek saw what they were doing to her as well, I think he was done with the Raiders organization, which is really sad because the Raiders organization has had nothing but headaches that Derek Carr has had to deal with on an annual basis. He had the Antonio Brown fiasco. He had the Henry Ruggs fiasco. He had the John Gruden fiasco. There was a lot of change and a lot of, oh my, this is happening right now and you have to react to it moments in the Derek Carr tenure. And I don't know if any other player or quarterback could have handled it as well as Derek Carr did. So for him to actually come out and bash the team now, it tells me that he's really done with them and he really feels like they didn't do what was in his best interest after all he has done the last almost decade has been a team guy first and always pumping up teammates, and he definitely did not get the same treatment that he gives out.
Yeah, I think he's one of the better people when it comes to an athlete, like on a personal basis. And he's been a pretty solid quarterback, maybe not a franchise quarterback, but he's been a very good, very solid quarterback for a miserable team that has had historical issues for decades. And they just kind of tossed him to the wayside. And then like he's completely replaceable. Bring in someone like Jimmy Garoppolo, who has had a failed physical and has a very easy contract to get out of. So they deserve what's coming to them, and I don't think that they're going to have a very successful next couple seasons. And I hope that Carr can find success with the Saints and maybe turn that franchise around, but maybe not that much for you since you're a Panthers fan and you don't want a rival to do well. But I think Carr deserves some success with another team.
Yeah, and he's got a shot with it. And I think they're doing the right thing because they did bring Gruden into their mandatory camps and just to see if they couldn't get some of the same language and kind of just make the transition a lot easier for Carr on his new team. The fact that they're going through all of these steps is a positive for Carr. I believe that he's going to be given every chance to succeed this year and in future years.
Well, Carr got away. Josh Jacobs is still stuck with that franchise and has not signed that franchise tender. Do you think he holds out at this point, Jeff?
Ooh. So we have to see what the Raiders look like going into this year. Like, do we know if Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be their quarterback? I assume he will be. I assume that's an overblown story, but that is a story nonetheless. Josh Jacobs is a player that probably deserves a long-term deal. He's a player that they turned down his 5th-year option. So they basically said, no, we're not sure if we want you. And then he just lit the world on fire last year. He's 25 right now. So he's still fairly young, and he probably has 25, 26, 27, 20, probably has 4 more years of productivity. So that seems like a long-term deal to me, but I don't know if the Raiders are going to be the team that signs him to that long-term deal. And I don't know if there's going to be too much bad blood for there to actually be a long-term deal here. So I do believe that Jacobs will play some of this season, but I do believe also there is a chance that he could sit out for the most amount of games that he could sit out before accruing that entire year of credit in the NFL. So he couldn't be, the tag can't transition over. Now, there is one thing that a lot of people have brought up is the Le'Veon Bell thing, because Le'Veon Bell actually sat out the entire season and they lifted the tag on him, but he went to the Jets the year after that, and he was never the same running back again. So there is something about sitting out the entire season. I don't know what it would look like if he took a different approach from Bell and sat out half the season and saved his body a little bit, made a little bit of money. Fantasy players will not like that. And for me, this at least raises my antennas, potentially start lowering him down my board.
Yeah, I think he's a pretty solid running back, one of the better running backs in the league right now, but I can see him not wanting to play for the Raiders, especially not wanting to play on a 1-year deal where he could risk being injured and lose out on money for the rest of his career. So it makes sense, especially with how terrible that they're probably going to be this year, that he holds out for an actual contract. I think he has almost as much leverage as Barkley right now, unless the Raiders really want to be terrible for some reason.
I mean, if they have no Garoppolo, they might have a reason to be terrible and they just might lift the tag.
Yeah.
He's currently a top 10 running back for me. And if we start to get more and more inklings that a holdout is possible, then it is possible for him to fall down my boards.
Yeah, if he's not going to play for the season or going to play for part of the season or he's going to miss games at all, you have to move him down. That's the only thing you can do.
Agreed.
So the Commanders, they have the approval set for the new sale with their owner, Jeff. Do we know what day that is?
So that is coming up very shortly, and that should be done by July 20th. The sale should be approved from the NFL. Like there was a lot of digging into the past of all of the owners, the majority owner, the minority owner, and it does seem like the sale could be completed on an emergency. It doesn't seem like it was a planned owners meeting on July 20th. Now, the funny thing about this is the owner could come in and clear house. Like, we don't even know what this is going to look like. I thought if the owner came in earlier in the season that he could have even cleared the coaching staff out and started over early, but I don't seem that is too likely at this point. But we also don't know what the team name is going to be for the long term either, because if we remember correctly, the Commanders, the trademark got denied. So I don't even know if they can legally make money off of Commanders materials and clothing.
All right, Jeff, I want you to pitch me their new name.
Woo! I mean, I think they should go back to Washington, red, and then just pick a word after red.
Red shirts?
Sure.
I think they should be the Washington Wiggles. I think that's about apt to how their franchise has been run the past decade.
It makes me think of the kids show, The Wiggles. I don't know if you've ever seen them, but that's what that makes me think of immediately.
I think that's where I got the name from, and I think that's what they should roll with.
We will see what comes of that. What if they went to the Red Hogs or the War Hogs or
I mean, those aren't bad. They kind of go back to some of their classic stuff with avoiding some modern issues, but I think that they need to come up with something better than the Commanders.
Well, they almost need like two names because they were like, because even though Redskins was one word, it came off as two words. So they almost need to have like a two-name team name mascot. So that's where I came up with the Red Hogs or the War Hogs. Like it just seems like two words, and it seems a lot better and a lot less XFL-ish than the Commanders do.
I mean, could they go back to Redskins and just change their logo to like a pig?
I don't know. The Pigskins? Ooh, the Washington Pigskins. Done and done. Because, I mean, they play with a pigskin.
Yeah, I think at some point we may have to change football to something else like gridiron or pigskin or something like that, just to make everything more seamless around the world. Because there's the world football that is actually played by kicking with your feet.
Wait, people actually watch soccer?
Yeah, it's only the most popular sport in the entire world.
Is it the most popular sport in the United States?
I don't even think it's top 3.
Is it top 4?
I don't know.
I think
What's more popular, hockey or soccer?
I don't know. I mean, that's a great question. Is UFC a sport? Is the WWE a sport?
Probably, man.
So they have a lot of competition here because I think they're on Fox Sports 1. But Harris here needs to hurry up, get this team under control so those players can start to get paid because, if you remember, Snyder put clauses into the contract basically telling them that they weren't being paid until the new owner came around. So he's got to shell out some money and then some more money.
Yep. Well, we were just talking about entertainment options in the U.S., and Hard Knocks has decided to pick a certain team, and that team would be the JETS, Jets. They have been voluntold that they are the new team. And Jeff, out of the 4 options that couldn't say no, are the Jets the best team?
They were the only team that was my choice because they do have a new quarterback and they have a quarterback that they drafted now that has to be the backup quarterback. So that will be interesting television to watch. It'll be interesting television to watch how Garrett Wilson and Alan Lazard and how Cobb and Davis and potentially Hopkins, they all fit together into this core that has to get this target pie that we talk about. It'll be compelling to watch who builds the best chemistry with Rodgers and kind of what relationship that Rodgers and the other players have with the coach going into grabbing a star quarterback. This is a star quarterback. This is a guy that's won the MVP 2 out of the last 3 seasons. And he kind of wants to see him rise back up to prominence. And he is making his presence known in OTAs and mini camps and everything like that. And I do believe that is going to help Rodgers and that team be more successful early on, but this is also a team that's going to get a lot of national exposure very early. And I don't know if you remember a team last year that got a lot of national exposure early, the Denver Broncos. And we got to watch them try to figure out how a new star quarterback and a new coach were going to fit together. And we got to watch the time out blunders, and we got to be Monday morning quarterback about how many mistakes they were making as a team. And sometimes it doesn't pay to be under the spotlight as you grow into a team. So they're going to have the trouble of doing that with Hard Knocks. And I believe they're on opening week of Monday Night Football. So they have a lot of lights looking at them.
Yeah, I think that the Jets without Rex Ryan aren't going to be as entertaining.
We'll see, though. We'll see. We have psychedelics and Aaron Rodgers and all that stuff. I mean, they could be really entertaining.
They could have done the Commanders. Will Ron Rivera keep his job? The ownership change from Snyder to Harris. They could do, rivalry. within the city with Baltimore. They could do, is Sam Howell going to be a good quarterback? What about these wide receivers? Like they could have done a lot with Washington. I think
I
they
know.
could have done some stuff with Chicago too. Will Justin Fields break out on the passing side this year? Is DJ Moore going to be a wide receiver one for people? Like, is he going to be a top dog? I think there's a lot of stuff they could have done. Is Roshan Johnson the best running back to ever enter the NFL? Oh, there's just so much they could have done, Jeff.
Yeah, there is, and there is a lot of good storylines, but I don't know if there's a better storyline than Aaron Rodgers to New York. And we all know that the storylines are what sell people to watch the TV show, and we'll see if they are right or wrong on that.
All right. Well, speaking of right or wrong, this has been the right show for you. So thank you guys for watching because this has been another episode of the Never Too Early Fantasy Football Podcast. We appreciate you guys for listening or downloading this show. Please do not forget to like and subscribe. Please leave a comment and share this show. Every little bit helps.
And before we go, we do want to send out our thoughts and prayers to Ryan Mallett's family. Ryan tragically passed away today. So we just want to let everyone know that our thoughts and prayers are with his family in this time. Obviously, no details have been released yet because it is so new, and we will update you on that next week if there's anything else that comes from that. As always, you can find us with our handle at N2EFantasy on Spotify, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Please give us a follow. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and remember, it's truly never too early for fantasy football.
Bye, everybody.